questions today that I would like, for you guys to walk away with. What's an ecosystem credit? We hear about carbon credits, but what's an ecosystem credit? Why is there a market for these credits, and who's buying these credits? What are some of the options available for the farmers in the area? And what are we doing as Missouri Soybean, Missouri Corn to help farmers make informed decisions? And how can you leverage the carbon and biodiversity on your own farms? So that's stuff that we'd like to hit today. So I'm just going to jump right in here with ecosystem credits. So we all have heard about carbon credits, but I want to talk to you guys about the ecosystem credits. So, an ecosystem credit is a credit for an action taken that improves the environmental condition. So again, I'll repeat that. It is a credit for an action taken that improves an environmental condition. So for an example, if you are restoring a wetland, that would be a wetland mitigation credit. This is something that's been around for a very long time. If somebody, say MoDOT goes through and builds a bridge across the street, maybe they destroy a little bit of wetland habitat, they need to offset that loss with a mitigation credit. So that's something that's been going on for a while, and people are familiar with that type of system. A next type of ecosystem credit would be if you're enhancing biodiversity, maybe, or protecting endangered species, that would be a biodiversity credit. Next would be reducing nutrient or soil runoff. That is a water quality credit, because with those practices you're increasing the water quality. When you're conserving water use, that's a water quantity credit. So we don't have that as much in Missouri, but out west, and when you're talking about some of the water and irrigation type stuff, water is a big deal, so that's a water quantity credit. Then when you talk about carbon credits, there's two types. You can sequester the carbon into the soil. It's a lot what Keith was talking about in his presentation. And you can also reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that you're using with your practices on your farm. So that's two types of carbon credits. So that just kind of shows you ecosystem credits. It's not just carbon. There's a lot more to it than that. So basically, if you can quantify the benefit of an outcome of a practice that you're doing, a new practice, that's key, in theory, a credit can be generated and can be sold to somebody who would want to purchase that credit. So that's kind of what we're going to go over today. So I kind of want to go over an ecosystem market, like what is an ecosystem market? It's an outcomes-based market approach to agriculture conservation. And I want you guys to think we're going to pay for performance here. So out there is a lot of things you guys are used to is cost share programs, paying for practice changes, paying for stuff like we're going to give you so many dollars per acre to implement this, and when you do that, we know it's going to have this outcome, so that's what we're going to do. This is a different way to think of it, is you're producing something and you're going, there's going to be people paying on the back end of the results of what's happening with that. Ecosystem market programs. Now this is what you're going to be hearing a lot about, and you're going to get, a lot of people get confused on it. This is like the market, this is the platforms, the other third-party verifiers that's going to come in and market and sell the credits that are generated. So that would be, carbon, water quality, and biodiversity, etc. Those ecosystem credits that I was talking about. And these markets, can be a little confusing, but they're also a very good chance to maybe bring in some extra revenue for things that you may be doing or thinking about doing on your farm. So it's definitely something, definitely key things we want to look at as farmers. For us, in my role, want to benefit the farmers in Missouri as much as we can. So that's something we really want to look at. Is how can we create more revenue and benefit the farmers? So with this, one I highlighted here is the markets, and these markets will be able to enable private entities, the companies, the buyers of these credits, to more quickly meet their sustainability goals. They set these voluntary sustainability goals, and this is a way that they can meet them more quickly. So I would like to go in and show you guys some of the reasons why there's a demand for these credits. I think we've all heard about it. I mean, carbon's nothing new. In the past probably 2 years, carbon has been all over the news, and every ag article, it seems like it pops up, there's something with carbon and carbon credits and global warming and climate smart farming. Continues on and continues on. So what's driving a lot of that? So for example, there's big companies out there that are willing to pay for carbon and environmental benefits. I'm just going to list a couple here to show you some examples. Nestl is one of the biggest ones who's committed. They just came out a couple months ago and said they're going to spend $3.5 billion in the next 5 years on sustainability goals to meet their goals in their companies set by their stakeholders. So they set these goals and their stakeholders want them to deliver on these goals. So that's very important. So they're willing to pay that type of money because they can see the return with their consumers wanting the product that was more environmentally friendly, and they can package that and label that and get a big return on that. So that's kind of what is driving some of this. And pretty much if you're a large company, you've set sustainability goals, because if you haven't set a sustainability goal, most people are not investing in your company anymore, and you're not going to be able to do something. So a lot of these companies are forced to set these sustainability goals if they want to stay competitive. So a couple more examples just to show you here. These are the things that corporations want to highlight. So McDonald's, for example, their goal is by 2030 to reduce emissions intensity per metric ton of food and packaging by 31% across the supply chain from the 2015 levels. That's a very direct goal. That's stuff they need to deliver on. But they can also, whenever they do these type of goals, show things like our target is the equal, to taking 32 million passenger cars off the road for an entire year. So whenever they do that stuff, people around the world can go, oh wow, by eating at McDonald's, I'm saving the planet in their mind. So anyways, I just kind of want to show how this is going, and there is a market for this. General Mills, here's another one. They want to, reduce absolute greenhouse gas emissions by 30% across this full value chain, which is very key to listen to too, is whenever they say value chain, because that changes the scope of the credit. So basically, when you're talking carbon credits, there's two scopes out there. There's Scope 1 credit, that is a regulatory credit. That is something that isn't really in Missouri. On the West Coast, East Coast, there's a few places where there is regulations put in place that forces companies to purchase credits to meet those goals. But really, what we're focused on here in Missouri, and what these carbon platforms are really starting to find out, is that there's more situations or more opportunity in Scope 3 credits, which is offsetting the supply chain. So, and working a lot with farmers across the state and talking about carbon and carbon credits and stuff like that, one of the big questions I get is, as a farmer, why do I want to sell a credit that can help a big corporation keep polluting? And that's a valid, very valid, concern. So whenever a Scope 3 credit, it's a lot more, it can paint a picture, it can tell a story, is whenever you're saying, I'm selling my crop to General Mills, and they're going to be making some food products out of this, and it's going to go from my field, to General Mills. They're going to produce a product, and it's going to go back, and it's going to put on the tables of many food, across, America. You can tell this story, and it makes a lot more sense. So basically, the Scope 3 credits is what is a big market right now, and that's all voluntary. And that's demand coming from these companies wanting to purchase these credits. So I kind of kept that short, but the list goes on and on and on of all these companies and the goals that they have set to be carbon neutral, sustainability goals and everything like that. So basically, just on a high level, I've been kind of talking about this, but why is there, this demand and everything? So I kind of want to go into this and just keep it high level. But, the market is only going to exist as long as there's a demand from the buyers out there. So basically how this works is you have the supply, which is going to be the farmers in this situation here. You can enroll your fields, you can adopt new practices, and you can generate credits on those fields. Then you have a private market program. This is what I'll kind of get into a little bit later, but these are the carbon platforms that you guys are hearing about that are selling these carbon credits. They're the ones that are going to measure, report, verify, and facilitate the sale of the carbon credit or the ecosystem credit in general. And then you got the demand side of it, which is obvious, the buyers, the companies that we were just talking about, wanting to purchase these credits. Then for them, they can report that and claim those sustainability goals as they're meeting that, and then market that out to show what they're doing to help the environment. So this is where it kind of gets a little confusing, and I think probably a lot of these folks in the rooms here today have probably been approached by some of these platforms and had opportunities. Some of you guys may have enrolled in these programs out there. So I just kind of want to show you some of the options and market providers out there. So basically, there's true ecosystem markets, okay? So one of those would be Ecosystem Service Market Consortium, ESMC. You guys might have heard about some of this stuff. They're still in pilot phase. Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. That's another one. These are focused on the outcomes. They're measuring the outcomes of a practice change, such as switching to carbon or switching to cover crops, changing your tillage, reducing your till, going to no-till, changing your nitrogen, or basically nitrogen, but nutrient management scheme. Those are all ways they can get into those programs, and pretty much all of these programs, those are the practice changes that will get you in. Then you can have carbon only, and I guess I should back it up. On the ecosystem credit, I didn't go into this. That's going to be focused on more than just carbon. That's going to be carbon and water quality, and then potentially biodiversity with that. So that's focused on more ecosystem credits for the work that you're doing on that acre of land or on that field in general. When you go to carbon only, you have Indigo Ag and Nori, for example. Those programs or platforms are just focused on carbon. They're not quantifying the water quality benefit or the biodiversity benefit. And then you got to look at other, companies too that are offering carbon programs. So these may be your input supply companies. So Bayer, Corteva, Nutrient. These are companies that are supplying something, but they're also going to offer that service to you. As their customer, hey, go ahead and we can get you enrolled in our carbon program. We'll quantify the carbon and sell it for you. We're going to pay you a flat rate per acre. Then you got, your data platform. So this is, the companies out there that are technology companies, collecting data and using that data. They also are interested in this because it's an opportunity for them as well. So they can offer that service as a provider of carbon credits. So, and I will say this is not a complete list. This is just something we were throwing together at Missouri Soybean to try to get an idea and do this. There's more out there than just this. So basically, what are we doing? What's Missouri Corn? What are we doing with checkoff dollars? What are we doing with our partners, to try to figure some of this stuff out, to help answer some of these questions? So basically, before I even started my role, about a year, 2 years ago, all this carbon talk was going on again. Farmers are asking a lot of questions that we could not answer. So why not, learn more, jump into something? So looked around a lot. This is, like I said, this is before I started with them. Because I said when I started, I jumped right into this role doing this stuff. But basically, we became a member of ESMC, which is the Ecosystem Credits platform that I was talking about earlier. And then with that, we launched a carbon pilot here in Missouri back in March of 2021. And I'm going to go into this more here shortly in more detail. But that was one of the first things I did whenever I started, was started working with them to get this carbon pilot up and going. With this, we also launched a biodiversity pilot in October of 21 this year. And I'm going to talk more about that. And then here coming up in 2022, this year, current year, still to come, we're going to be working with the Outcomes Fund, so Soil and Water Outcomes Fund, to bring more opportunities in Missouri. with a different program, and it's quite different. It's a practice-based program, so we can have different opportunities and learn and try to figure this stuff out so that we can relay that information back to the farmers. You know? And like I mentioned before, the goal with this is to learn. We want to learn to be able to provide some unbiased information back to you guys, and that has been very good feedback that I've been getting from farmers so far with this is we want something that, you know, you guys aren't selling us nothing, so I want to listen to what you have to say to know what's going on with this. And as we were talking about, it's so fast changing. You know, as I called it, the carbon world is just changing every day. Every time you look at something, there's something new out there with carbon and new opportunities and what should I do? So that's kind of what we want to do and make sure that Missouri has a voice. On this leading edge, we want to make sure Missouri has a voice as they develop these programs, these markets, these opportunities. Why not be out there working in it so we can put our input out there? So that's kind of why we're into this space and checking all this out. And that's why I'm kind of here talking to you today. So I'll go into the carbon program that we launched. Like I said, back in March is when we officially launched this pilot program. Partnered with MFA over here. Like I said, Missouri corn, Missouri soybean, and then ESMC is our third-party verified on this. So our goal was to enroll 5,000 acres in Missouri, focused north of the Missouri River, and that was based on ESMC's modeling that they had available at the time. And the goal was to get those acres enrolled and just kind of learn from it and see what we can do. When enrolling, you know, I never mentioned that we'd even have a payment to the farmer. That was not part of it. It was a, hey, we're going to do this to learn. You're going to get to the marketplace. It's a 2-year low-risk pilot program. We want your feedback. We want you involved in this. And when the sell the credit happens, you know, we don't know what the market's going to be, but you'll get, you know, the majority of that. ESMC takes a very short cut of it. I don't know exactly what that is yet, but anyways, we didn't want to lock any of that down because we know it's changing every day. We don't want to say, we're just going to give you $5 an acre to do this or $10 an acre. We want to really see what the marketplace is doing. And this is a big part of what ESMC is doing. They're doing a soft launch with all these pilot programs across the nation. So this is just a way to kind of highlight some of that stuff. With this, within, heck, a couple, maybe 5 days, like a week, I had 22 producers that have reached out and they said they would commit 14,000 acres to this pilot project. And we're like, whoa, we're going to have to slow down a little bit. So a lot of people were interested. I never thought we'd have that much interest in it. But most of the time when people were talking to me, they were so interested in just learning. They love the idea of a 2-year pilot that they don't have to put any money into, and they may not get any money out of it, but they're not locked into something right now. They can kind of see what the marketplace is going to do. So that was a very key aspect of it. So with that, we had to cut things down, and a lot of acres couldn't enroll, maybe because we called them early adopters, people who are doing this already. It wasn't a new practice change. And I didn't really go into that earlier, but that's one of the #1 complaints in this market right now, is if you're already doing this stuff on your farm, you're already doing it, you're excluded from this. And that's really kind of the case right now. I mean, the Bayer program is the only one out there that's allowing you to backtrack right now, as far as I know, on that. But the newly practice is, you got to think about it from the buyer standpoint. If you're already doing that stuff, that carbon's already been putting down, so that's a change that's already happened and it's already taken place. If a company wants to actually take credit for offsetting what they're doing, they are going to have to do a new change, new carbon into the soil that typically wouldn't have been doing that. So that's kind of, I didn't go into that earlier, but I'll go back here. But with this, you know, we are done right now with 2021. So we had 2021 enrollment. So that would be if you planted a cover crop for the first time in the fall of 2020. If you implemented tillage changes in the spring of 21 and changed up your fertilizer. Those are the 3 main ways you could get into the program. Those are the acres we're looking at. So we just now finally finished up with the data entry. So all those practices were done last crop season. And we got the data entry in, and next step is going to be, ESMC is going to be selling those credits. We look to see those credits sold here pretty soon. In April or May is when we look to see those credits sold, and we're very excited to see what the price can be for this, because we still haven't set any prices. We haven't done this stuff. So it's just interesting to see what that could bring with this, and once that happens, you know, we're going to be more than happy to be showing the results, showing what we're finding out here. So I think that would be really good to have that kind of look behind and the transparency there. So we're excited about that. So that's kind of about the carbon, but with this pilot, you know, me with my background of being a wildlife biologist, you know, I really like the idea of biodiversity, you know, and biodiversity credits, and I started hearing more and more about this. So, you know, why not work on this in Missouri? You know, we have a big conservation minded, you know, the public out here, or the people who really like conservation. They're willing to fund it, they're willing to do this stuff. So it's a perfect spot to pilot this. So, you know, we partnered with the Missouri Department of Conservation, continued on with MFA, you know, the Missouri Corn, Missouri soybean, obviously. And we, you know, we're looking at low yielding parts of the field. You guys heard about this a lot, you know, with soil health and conservation and stuff like that. Is what's the edges of the field? What's some low yielding spots of it? So we want to really focus on some of that stuff, and you know, we couldn't do it all, you know, because it's just such a complex system. So we just said we'll focus on pollinator habitat, on edge of field, parts of the field that may not be used, and things like that. So that's kind of where those biodiversity pilots going. We're still currently enrolling fields. I think I'll probably close that down in March 31st or a little after, something like that. We'll still be enrolling after that as well if we want to get into this program. But basically, you know, it's a way to be, it could be another opportunity out there for farmers. So that's what we're really looking at. And, you know, for us, it's kind of, it's the leading edge. There hasn't been, as far as we know, any biodiversity credits sold in the United States yet. So this would be the first one sold if possible. With this, we knew, you know, there's a lot of risk with this. It's a high dollar, buying the seed, doing all this stuff. So we want to make it low risk as possible. So the Conservation Department decided they would fund incentive payments. So with that, you know, we can guarantee some money to the farmer for putting these practices in. And it's a 2-year pilot. You know what, if you don't like it at the end of the day, you can just rip it up, put it back into what you want to at the end of the day with this. But during those 2 years, we're going to want to study and try to measure the outcome, the benefit of that habitat that was put in there. So anyways, we're going to measure and create a standardized way to measure the biodiversity. This is the tough part. Then we're going to try to sell that. When I say we, ESMC will be selling that. That's nothing that we will be doing. But it's going to be interesting. These companies like Nestl that I just mentioned before did not tie themselves in their $3.5 billion that they committed. They said sustainability goals, and biodiversity is one of those. So companies like that have already reached out and been interested, like, hey, what's going on with this? What are you guys doing? Is that another opportunity for us to reach our goals? So we're very excited about that. And there's a lot of opportunities, I feel like, with this further into the future as we start going. I mean, more and more consumers are wanting this type of stuff. And whenever you can see right here the pretty monarch butterfly, you know, in this room we may not sit there and get all warm feeling in our hearts and souls about this, but a lot of people do. So there's a market for this type of stuff, and it can benefit your farm, your sustainability goals, and it can also benefit, you know, companies who's wanting to do this. So it could be overall, could be another way. I mentioned the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. Basically, this is very similar to the carbon that we're talking about, but it's a practice space. So what they do is this started up in Iowa, and they branched out to some other states. They're paying for water quality and carbon with this program. So these are 2 parts of the state they want to look at, and they're also going to be looking at rice production as well. You know, so these are the 2 parts of the state that they're looking for. We haven't started doing any enrollment yet, but that will hopefully be coming pretty soon with the Iowa Outcome Fund. So what a lot of people, you know, are interested in is what in the heck is a carbon credit worth? What is a water quality credit worth? What is a biodiversity credit worth? So many questions with this, and there's a lot more to come for sure within the next few years once some of the stuff is made public of what's going on. But for example, I'll just show you. Bayer's $9 an acre, $3 per year, $9 an acre per year, flat rate, $3 for reduced tillage, and $6 for cover crops. That's how they operate. Soil and water outcomes zone. This is the one I just talked about. Last year they were averaging $40 per acre, and that's for carbon and water quality credits that they were selling off of that. Indigo Ag is averaging $10 to $15 per acre. Land O'Lakes are true carbon, $20 per ton of carbon. Nori's $15 plus is kind of interesting, a credit, a Nori token that you can't use or is restricted for 10 years. But those are some of the things we're talking about with it. It gets very confusing because these companies are wanting, they can use it as a marketing tool as well, which is, good on their end. We'll give you credits that you can spend, on our products. And then Corteva's $15 a ton. So we're kind of seeing some of this, and I didn't really go into this either, but, if you were doing everything right, as Keith mentioned before, with your no-till, your cover crops, and you're doing the soil health stuff that you're talking about, what can your soil actually hold, and round about our best guess right now is maybe 1 carbon credit per acre, maybe a carbon credit and a half per acre if you're doing all those things. If you're, maybe your soil's not holding it, you have different soils, it may be a little less than that. So when you're looking at some of this per ton, that's per ton of carbon equivalent sequestered into the soil, or reduced through your greenhouse gas emissions. So that's whenever they come up with those equations for this ton. And that's what I was saying is the outcome base of the ton versus the practice base, which is per acre. And I will say that this is changing all the time, so if you guys took a picture of that or something, it's probably already changed, at this time. So basically, how can we leverage the carbon? How can we leverage the biodiversity? There's a lot of questions with this. So I'm just giving you a few things that's on my mind here with it, is start planning. That was mentioned before. You want to start planning for your stuff. You want to have a conservation plan in mind for your farm. Not, most people are planning years in advance. Am I going to be planting corn, soybeans, wheat? What's my rotation? What am I going to be doing? Well in advance. So be planning what your plan is with conservation practices. Most people that I've talked to right now, they're not changing what they're doing because of a carbon program. The price of carbon is not high enough for them to go out and just change and switch to cover crops and no-till. Most people are doing that anyways because they want to do it, and they're enrolling in these programs because why not? I've already done it, or I'm just starting to switch, so I'm going to just get this extra money at that time. But I can't stress enough the planning of it. Start thinking about, am I going to have to change any equipment when I do this practice change? What's this going to cost me? What's this going on? Is there any programs available out there to make this switch? There's all kinds of grant opportunities coming all the time about changing your, energy efficient equipment, switching to conservation drills and doing this type of stuff. There's programs out there. So make sure you check that stuff out. And see if it's going to work in your operation, because sometimes it's just not going to work. Some of these things aren't going to work with what you're doing. So make sure it fits, make sure it works, get you a plan involved. And basically, I would sit and wait on it if you're not making the plan right now to see what's going to happen within the next year or two, because a lot's going to develop in the next year or two on some of this stuff. So that's just kind of my recommendation on some of this. And if you're enrolling into these ecosystem markets, definitely be asking a lot of questions. It never hurts to ask questions. I would not be signing up for a 10-year contract if you're not certain what you're signing. And it's very confusing. A lot of platforms, they're getting paid money to sell you the product. They're getting money to sell you the carbon stuff. Make sure you're asking the questions. There's no point. It's a confusing thing. People just ask questions. I have a list of questions on our website that, you know, you should be asking for carbon, you know, if you're going to be enrolling in some of this stuff. So I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you, give you some of those websites. It's on Missouri Corn website, it's on Missouri Soybean website under our carbon tab. And just like I said, think about some of those low yielding areas part of your field too as you're continuing on this crop season 2022. Be thinking about that when you farm up on the edge and you see the yield drop and you see some of this stuff. There's going to be opportunities out there to enroll some of that stuff. Maybe take it out of production. Maybe use state or federal cost share money to do that, plus add on an ecosystem credit on top of that. So be thinking about that in the long term, and don't just jump right into it right now because it's the hot topic. Really make an informed decision. So with that, I'll end my presentation. I'll be here all day over here, so feel free to ask me any questions you guys want. And appreciate you guys' time.